Morning, everybody.
Good morning. Welcome to your daily huddle. Today's Friday. As always, Gio and I are here for a conversation on business and leadership. We say that you can have everything in the world, but unless you can create an enterprise around it and turn it into a legacy for your family, your community, and the world, maybe it's not worth it. So that's why we're here. And we're going to dive today into what is at the heart of stronger communities, more vibrant communities, and infinitely richer communities. And that is the invaluable contribution and unique perspectives of people with disabilities. In a world that often emphasizes limitations, we are here, and I'm glad Sue, Kurt, and Doug, you're here to celebrate the limitless potential that arises when we come together, learn from each other, and support one another. So today we're going to explore inside of a question called, how do you help people with disabilities, and how do people with disabilities help you? Kurt and Sue are here and both passionate about that space, bringing with them today Doug and Kurt. I want to give you an opportunity to introduce Doug and set the stage for today's conversation. Welcome to all of you.
Yes, thank you very much, Sorrel. Great to see our friend Peter James just connecting in here. So yeah, we've got a great group of friends here, and I celebrate what you all have been experiencing, over 1,000 times over right here at the Daily Huddle. And, there's a little bit of a mantra in this when we say, how are you helping someone with a disability, or how are people with disabilities helping you? And then to think about that message and to be like, well, what about if somebody is a person, with a disability? So we're going to cover this from different angles. And just like here at the Daily Huddle, we all have our roles here. I celebrate the role of Lizeth here, and Giovanni, and Sorrel, and Peter James, Rashida, Dr. DJ Davis, Doug here that we're talking about, Emily, who is an ambassador with pulling each other along. And Doug's going to speak to that a little bit. And I want to propose that. As we reflect back from before the Daily Huddle began, and then coming into the Daily Huddle, and what this all is, this collective energy of co-creating the Daily Huddle. And then I came into the picture, and I brought these messages about how is this placed with the disability community? How are we letting people with disabilities come into the Daily Huddle and do some leadership here to show their abilities? We've made comments that I have come to find that really people with disabilities are the masters of ability. So in my work, I found that there are huddles all around the world of people doing great work with great messages, resembling the power of humanity and what people can do, and starting with the power of one. So each and every person watching and listening to the Daily Huddle has an insurmountable capacity to come and fill the needs of the world and to come and serve an other person. A lot of people in business say, one at a time. I do my thing, one at a time. That's how we concentrate on this. And, and this is a business and leadership, call, isn't it? Friday is devoted to business and leadership. So I really want to focus on this as we talk about the lives and journeys of people with disabilities. And for those of us that don't as much identify as being those who qualify for disability programs, what is our role in bringing this all together? Like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., I have a dream. Well, folks, I have a dream. My personal dream is picture a setting along a waterway. A setting along a waterway so we can do the aquatics, scuba diving. I've told the stories of water skiing. My wife Sue is here. We have a tremendous story to tell. I was going to say sell, but so the idea is, it just opens up the gateways to amazing things. So my challenge here today is, how is what we're talking about today showing up in the work you do? We're talking right now during the business day. So I want to see how, when we make our comments today, how are you picturing that this is a chief executive officer being a person with a disability? How is this a president of a company being a person with a disability? Let's celebrate how we've had presidents with disabilities. So this being said, I want Doug Cornfield to come in here. I'm very gracious, Doug, that you have come this morning. This is going to be a very powerful daily huddle. Doug, you have a tremendous story. Sorrel and Giovanni have showed up on our radio show, AbilityMKE Now. Doug here has helped Sue and I in our work of the last few years with AbilityMKE Now. And he is surrounded by people who have tremendous stories. And Doug celebrates this so much that he has written a couple books to help share this around. And Doug is doing events, including today. There's an amazing event that Doug is leading today out of Fort Myers, Florida. And he has an element that he does with a group, an amazing group that I've been able to be introduced to through the Disability Channel with Jay Stoyan. We've talked about that because, again, to me, my flair is I want this to be heard widely around the world. And that's why I got involved in mass media. And Doug is in this space too. We have our friend Dave Stevens, who is a 7-time Emmy award-winning broadcaster. And he happens to be a person with these professional capabilities, and he has limb difference, born without legs. And he's a tremendous athlete, tremendous athletic success. And, Doug and I, with our friends, we celebrate what our friends are doing and what we learn about it. And so, Doug, come into this pulling each other along mantra, and kind of how is this kind of circling around D3 Day, Disability Dream and Do Camps. I love it because it's helping children with disabilities play sports. Doug, tell us all about it. You're an amazing guy doing amazing things with amazing people. Tell the story, Doug. What do you got?
And so, first of all, I just love the whole concept of the huddle, because when we're talking about a huddle, that's where we come together to be impacts for other people. We're impacts for those around us. And though I didn't have, quote, a disability, where I come into this is I have a son that was born with neither arm developed. And all of a sudden you're thrust into this different world of how do you raise up a child? How do you allow him to experience the world? And with these challenges of people looking at him, soccer coach or a soccer referee was telling him to get his arms out of his shirt when he couldn't do that as a youngster. And so you deal with all these different situations and issues. And then I get to read about a man named Dave Clark, who's now my business partner. Amazing person, didn't know about his story. Polio survivor, never had the use of his legs after his 10-month of getting the polio. Walked with crutches, but had an amazing 10-year career of playing minor league baseball on his crutches. And so here I'm a father with a child with limitations, and I get to meet this person. And to quicken the story, Dave, with his amazing story of playing professional baseball, minor league baseball, coaching the Olympics, all those kind of things, he had a spirit of impact by not allowing his limitations to hold him back. And his parents were a big part of that. And that was part of our story of coming together. And so after I left the financial world, Dave and I began to expand what he was already doing, which were sports camps for children with all different disabilities. Children and young adults come to these camps, and they're different. You see things like this, but because of his connections, we were able to get professional baseball teams to actually be the volunteers on the field, on a professional field. And we've created this event called Disability Dream and Do. And there's so many aspects now that happen with this event. You know, we have the volunteers come in, the parents and the caregivers get to hear about these stories. Our themes are let's pull each other along, but and, you know, obviously kindness, all those kind of things, inspiration. But we're desirous that these children and young adults get to see examples of people that didn't let their limitations hold them back. And we want them to explore that potential. And we give them that opportunity by being on the field, getting excited about hitting a ball, throwing a ball, and oftentimes for the first time. And I guess you want to say feeling normal, but their normal is their normal. And now we're just allowing them to experience these things with these incredible examples, as Kurt said, with Dave Stevens, 7-time Emmy Award winner, born with no legs, 3-sport athlete, Dave Clark, who I just mentioned. And the whole pulling each other along concept is more of a business concept where we're looking for impact members to come in so that we can continue with our impactful events. And we want to impact those businesses, but at the same time, we want to impact these families so that these children and young adults that come to our events can explore their potential. So in a nutshell, we've got so many stories I can tell. I don't know how much time I have, but we want to encourage folks to get in that huddle, be an impact in that huddle so that that huddle can expand and have an impact greater on the life of many and pull each other along, and as we're pulled along as well.
Doug, thank you for sharing the story. And it's not just a story. This is really your life.
Has become my life.
You know, your son was born the way he was born, and you were lucky enough to be his father, and him lucky enough for you to be his father, and the world to be lucky enough that the two of you cross paths that way. So would you tell us a bit of the human story? What was it like for you when your son was born? And what was it like during that? And I imagine there was an inflection point where you yourself had to overcome a sort of quote unquote disability as a parent and emerge as who you are today with your son making the tremendous difference that you guys are making in the world. Tell us a little bit about that trajectory. I'd love to hear.
Yeah, well, you got to dig deep because we had an emergency delivery. Gideon is my son's name, and he was we were planning to have a home birth. We had home births with our two previous children in the Atlanta, Georgia area, and all of a sudden, 2 months before he's supposed to be born, we're rushing him to the hospital for an emergency delivery. At this point, we had no idea that he had any kind of disability, and so I'm getting a call. I should have. There we go. I hope I didn't mess that all up.
No,
My back.
you're good.
Yeah, there you go. So, you know, and so all of a sudden we're rushing to the hospital, and we know it's 8-9 weeks early, and we had this emergency delivery, and out comes this small little child, and then you see, my first sight was I could see there was something missing, and it's you're numb. At this point they rush him away from you. There's all of those emotions that you're wanting to take care of my wife as well. We barely got to see him, and at this point for him it was, can he survive? He was 2 pounds 13 ounces, I guess, is the weight. So then now you're in a situation, you got 4 older children, you left them at home with friends, and you're going back and forth to the hospital, and it is very surreal, the whole scenarios. And just months, there was times when literally I would be rocking him to sleep 24/7 because he was unconsolable at times, with sickness. He actually got meningitis. There's other things that happened, and then we found the other one like shorter than the other. And so here, and then contrast that, he has an older brother who was an All-American athlete in high school, scholarship athlete, all those kind of things. And so there's some real contrast. And here, a year and a half later, we're moving my family up north, and I read an article about this Dave Clark who played professional baseball on crutches. How crazy is that? And then this Dave Clark was moving from Sweden to Corning, New York, of 10,000 people, and I got to meet Dave with my son Gideon in my arms at a baseball game. Dave was coaching at that game. It was a local pro team, minor league team in our area. And then we had breakfast, and then all of a sudden we're having breakfast and I'm peppering him with questions David never gotten before. What did your parents do? How did they allow this story to happen? And now we get to share that story all over. And, and we didn't treat Gideon any different because of that. And that was one of the messages that Dave said, don't treat him any differently. And obviously you have to treat a child differently that doesn't have arms. You put him in his car seat, you buckle him up. But then you get to a point, and this was heart-wrenching. There was a time when Gideon was 8 or 9 years old, and he actually has 2 younger brothers. So we have 7 children altogether. And in that, he let his little brothers buckle him up in the car. It seems innocent. They're just trying to be helpful. Gideon doesn't have arms, so they buckle him up. And we got to the point where mom and dad had to tell Gideon, no, we're not going to let your little brothers do that anymore. It's not helpful. And a lot of that comes from the spirit of Dave Clark. You got to be able to do what you can do yourself as well. So now Gideon cooks, he works, he's been a big part of our fundraising in the past. And he's still trying to figure out his way, all those kind of things, just like any young man. But he can live an independent life. He has to do things differently. And he can be as successful as anybody as long as he just does what he wants to do. And so we had that experience of learning from Dave Clark, and of course Dave and Gideon have become friends and acquaintances and tell stories, all those kind of things. And so he had a mentor to see firsthand that you can be successful regardless of your situation.
Yeah, I'm curious. Kurt was making the connection to CEOs, business owners earlier. Having the fortune of being a father in that situation must have transformed you in some way. There was a way perhaps you were before, and then who you are now. What's that transformation? And what has it made available for the people around you?
Yeah, certainly transformation. I mean, I think, I joke about my wife of 34 years, 5 years, I think we're going on. And I say that I've been married to like 14 different women, but it's all her. It's all the same person. It's just we change. And I've changed too. And part of this is a big change. I mean, I was an entrepreneur. I had some real successes in the 90s. Wound up partnering with my brothers at Merrill Lynch, and we had a nice big book that we were doing there. And then you're in this situation where Dave Clark's trying to call me, doesn't know I'm on this call. And so so we just, I don't even know where I was with that. Sorry, but we've just pushed on. It has changed me. I mean, I left Merrill Lynch to partner with Dave Clark because I was so inspired. I felt like his story should be told because people like me needed to hear this story. And I've been on that quest. That's our business, through the books we've written, through the speaking events, through a movie deal that we actually signed, which who knows what sells or obviously to make happen. And our main focus is how do we impact people by getting these stories out of all these people that we've met, so that when a parent like me finds out that their child has some differences, that's not the end of the world. Yeah. That whether they're intellectual, whether they're physical, it doesn't matter to us. It doesn't matter the age. We want them to be exploring potential, whatever that potential is. None of us have it all. None of us get it all. People say, "Oh, can I have it all?" Well, no, none of us can have it all. But we can find out what the our roof is. We can find out how much we can get and how many people we can help. And that's our whole theme this year is exploring potential. I've said it many, many times. And in a business sense, we want to explore our potential in business as well. And in our case, we're inviting business people in to be impactful partners with us. And so, and not just say, "Hey, give us your money." We want to be an impact to them as well. And so it's a crisscross of pulling each other along. And that's kind of our theme. And even a group I have called the Pulling Each Other Along Collective that we've started, where it's people, the whole vision of that is how do we as business people do something good in this world, like Disability Dream and Do, and support what we do with these camps, but also support each other in our businesses.
Yeah. Speaking of impact, Doug, it's been a while now. How long has it been How old is your son?
25.
25.
I
You know,
met Dave Clark 24 years ago,
yeah,
but we didn't start these camps in the business until after I left Merrill Lynch in 2010.
2010. So at least it's been 13 years, right?
Correct. And
So
not
over the
knowing what we
course,
were doing.
yeah, over the course of 13 years, speaking of impact, um, there's likely to be that one or two points of impact that your quest, along with Dave and your son, have had on the world that left you touched, moved, inspired, and even bigger than you already are. Could you share one of those with us?
Sure, sure. So if we go back to my office at Merrill Lynch, Dave Clark had written a book called The Diamond in the Rough, the Dave Clark story. And I wasn't the author or anything, but I was kind of pushing him behind the scenes to get that done. And then I helped him organize book signings. Okay, so this is now several years ago. I was still at the office at Merrill Lynch, and Dave has this book out, and I set up 5 book signings just as a friend for him in the area, because obviously in Corning, New York, the only professional baseball player that ever played on crutches is a bit of a legend, you know, in some people's
Celebrity, right?
right. So you know, he doesn't think so, but it is true for the people that know his story. And so I set up these book signings, and I was rereading chapter 2, where Dave thanks all the people that helped pull him along in his life. He calls it my saviors, but it was the people that helped him. In one of those stories, he talks about having all this anxiety built up because of a field trip where the whole class, his whole first grade class, would be walking 5 blocks away to the local fire hall. So for all the kids, that's a great day in 1960. But for him, that was a nightmare. Being left behind, not being able to keep up, not even knowing if he could go 5 blocks on his crutches at that time. And so it became this whole week or two of just building anxiety in his little 6-year-old self. So much so that he tried to do the I'm sick thing with his mother and tried to pretend he was sick the morning of the event to get out of it. But she was old school, as he would say, and she said, "No, Dave, you're going to school. You better get ready right now." And so off to school he goes with all this anxiety. He gets to the back of the line thinking that's his best next mode of protection, where maybe the class will go out in front of him and they won't see him. They won't pick on him. They won't call him names, slowpoke. He was called Olio by his classmates, which rhymed with polio, which he absolutely hated. So bullying is nothing new. It's just different now. And so here he gets to this back of the line, and up comes a classmate of his. His name is Ernie Pound, bringing his radio flyer wagon to school that day to pull him. And Dave never forgot it. And so, as a father with my son Gideon at that point, I would read that story in the book, and I'd get the goosebumps every time. And as it would be, I wound up finding Ernie, living about 45 minutes away. They had not seen each other since first grade because Ernie's family had left the area. And lo and behold, he remembered the wagon. He didn't know Dave, didn't know Dave had gone on to do all these things. Shows up at a book signing, puts a book underneath Dave's nose and simply says, "Sign this one to Ernie Pound." And of course, you know, Dave slaps this book, and he couldn't believe it that after all these years, he's being reunited with this little boy that brought his wagon to school to save the day. And that's a game changing story, because here we share that at almost every keynote, every speech. It's our whole theme of pulling each other along. We have an award that we give out called the Pulling Each Other Along Award. I have a book called Pulling Each Other Along, with 30 more stories like that, written kind of like a chicken soup for the soul. I love my children's book. You know, it's one of the, I don't know, best things I've ever done in life. I wrote a children's book called A Pound of Kindness in honor of Ernie Pound. And to get that book into people's hands is pretty special, but it's to get the story, because it's a good Samaritan story. It's an anti-bullying story without, in modern day, you know, and it's still alive today, because Dave and I, we're going to be at an event. We're going to be sharing this online and live to people in a room. And we've done that to 10 people, 2 people, and hundreds and thousands of people.
Well, we could go on and on and on, Doug. This is amazing. Thank you so much for the bigness of your heart and the tremendous difference you're making in the world. You talk about goosebumps. I have goosebumps now. And let's open it up to the rest of the folks who are here who probably have goosebumps too, to maybe ask you a couple of questions or share their
Sure,
comment.
sure.
So, folks, Doug is all yours.
Oh my, that's scary. We have plenty more stories to tell. I mean, you can go on our
Go
pulling each
ahead,
other along.
Cece.
Your name is Doug?
Yes, it is. CC, I'm Doug.
Hey, thank you so much for your story. I'm on the road. I'm actually in Alabama coming from Texas, but your story is so amazing. And that book, A Book of Kindness, is that the name of it?
It's called A Pound of Kindness.
A
And
Pound of Kindness.
A Pound of Kindness. The young man that brought the radio flyer wagon, his name was Ernie Pound. And so we called it A Pound of Kindness. And you can find that right now on probably pullingeachotheralong.com is the best place to order that. We ran out of them, and I just ordered 5,000 more copies. And so
Wow.
we're wanting to sell those, obviously, and get that story out.
We got to do
That's
something
very
with pound cake.
impactful. Yeah, I sell pound cake. But
Oh, there you go.
Something.
a pound of kindness, a pound of butter makes a pound of pound cakes. You know, one
Well,
thing. Wait a minute.
that makes people happy too. That pound cake, I'm sure.
Yes, this is so inspiring. Pulling someone else along, and this is
Pulling
what
each
I
other along.
experienced. Yes, someone's pulling me along, and I'm so grateful. So, thank you for the pound of kindness.
There you
Thank
go.
you, Cece. Shiva, you had your hand up. Go ahead. And then we'll go to Dr. Davis.
Hi, oh my God, I'm like over here just getting so teary-eyed. Thank you for sharing that story. It just it has me realizing two things. Is that when it comes to contribution, there are ways in which we can make contribution that could really make a difference in someone's world. And that's big for me to remind myself of, because I have an ongoing kind of running shame that I'm not like doing enough for the people in my life. And just recently, someone was like just telling me what I meant to them. And it was kind of hard for me to really take in, because in my mind, well, I certainly hadn't done as much as they did for me, but whatever way in which I show up, it is like the thing for them. So as you said that, I'm like, okay. And then on the reverse, I've had so many people who are like the version of like they're bringing the wagon for me. And sometimes they can't understand like why I'm so grateful. And it's because like I have my version in terms of having dealt with anxiety and certain mental challenges of like all that what do you call it? That anxiety that the child felt. I have versions of that. And I've had people who were like that wagon, and I'm like, oh, thank you so much. So I'm just so grateful that you're here and that you shared that, because it just is so meaningful. And I'm so glad. I was so sleepy this morning and my spirit said, just get up. You might be 10 minutes late, but just get up. You might just get a little nugget of what you need. So I'm so grateful because I got the nugget.
There you go. That's exciting. Very good.
Thank you, Shiva.
You know, and it is that cooperation. I came up with something. I don't know if you know the old bird song, for every season, turn, turn, turn. Almost everybody my age is going to know that song or whatever. But that's actually taken out of Ecclesiastes, where it says there's a time to cry, there's a time to mourn, there's a time to laugh, there's all those things. And so I took that in a keynote I did years ago at the World Congress on Disabilities in Atlantic City. And I said, there's a time to pull and there's a time not to pull. There's a time to be pulled, and then there's a time not to be pulled. And there's a balance with all of that, because we don't want to just hop in the wagon and take somebody's spot if we don't really need that help. On the other version, we need to be pulling other people along. And sometimes in the disability world, like my son Gideon with his seatbelt situation, where he he needed to learn how to do his own seatbelt. It wasn't helping him to keep pulling him along in that situation. And so there's a whole balance, I think that we need to reflect on as we're in the huddle, as we're pulling each other along. Because sometimes it's not helpful. It's not helpful just to say, hey, give that person $1 million when they're just going to blow it. And so now you can give us $1 million because it's going to go to Disability Dream and do sports camps. But the scenario is we want to be pulling each other along and helping each other and but in balance.
Doug, that is just amazing. So amazing that you actually have Dr. Davis on camera today. Dr. Davis, it's your turn.
Hi, everyone. I'm at the gym. Please excuse the sweat. But you know what? I am inspired by what Shiva just shared. And basically, what I wanted to share is that I want to so much admire Doug Cornfield. You're doing amazing work. You and your son are doing amazing work, and thank you. And one thing I wanted to share is that I know for a fact that sometimes disabilities take place and manifest in different ways. And one thing that I have discovered is that when you have an invisible disability, just like Shiva says, that there's an element of shame involved because people look at you on the surface and think, well, why aren't they doing this? Why can't they do this? X, Y, Z. And that element of shame comes in from society, from family members. And one thing that I've discovered is, as a leader, it's transforming when I share with people who are junior to me that I have an invisible disability. It's transforming because then they take this big sigh of relief, like, oh my gosh, oh, she's not gonna judge me because of XYZ. Oh my gosh, I can actually share with her my invisible disability. Even though we live in 2024, there still is an element of shame related to certain types of invisible disabilities. And I think that we as leaders, sometimes if we have courage to share that and share it with those that we're leading, it can just transform the culture, and not only transform the culture, but yield greater productivity and love and kindness in that work environment. With that, I'm complete. Thank you. I'm going to go back to exercising now.
You're muted, Sorrel.
You're talking and you're
Dr.
speechless.
Davis. Thank you. Time flies on the Daily Huddle, folks. It's 34 after. We're going to close the show, but not without giving Doug the opportunity to say one last sentence.
Well, I just appreciate being here and Kurt's support and pulling us along and I do love the concept of the huddle, because we do need to huddle together. When I played basketball, when I ran with track and I had relays, some of those memories for me are some of the best memories I ever had. And, when you put that baton and you get it from one of your teammates, you're not just running for yourself, you're running for your teammate too. And some of the best moments that I remember is when we actually huddled together and then we break and then we run as hard as we can or play as hard as we can. And then that's when we get the success.
Yeah. Well, who knew, Gio, that the huddle would be this kind of huddle? So I want to acknowledge each and everyone who's made it possible for this huddle to be celebrating 1,036 episode. And I want to acknowledge my partner, my friend, my brother, Giovanni. The difference that we're committed that this huddle makes is shining brightly today. in your speaking, Doug, in your generosity, Kurt, and in your partnership, Sue. And I am touched by that, not as an accomplishment, but like the fulfillment of what Gio and I really wanted to do. And we never had to do it alone. We've been being pulled along all this time. Gio, do us the honors and make Robin happy with the way you close the show.
Thank you, Sorrel. Thank you, Doug, Kurt, Sue, Shiva. Thank you all for sharing today. Stacey, Dr. DJ, I love you all. This has been phenomenal. So have a great weekend. We will see you Monday, 9 a.m. Eastern time. But in the meantime, to live a life like a renegade, love. Love those you have an opinion different than yours. Love those who are going to vote different from you. Love. Love your ex. Love your mother-in-law. Love. Love. Laugh out loud. Stretch your cheeks. It helps with the wrinkles. It helps with the white hair. It helps. Laughing out loud helps you with everything. Eat more plant-based. Get closer to the trees. Hug the trees. Eat the trees. Might as well let the little animals run around. Why not let them run around a little bit more? Sleep. At least 7 hours. Sorrel says 8. I say 6. 7. Sleep 7. If you can't sleep, read a book. Don't listen to it. Read a book. Your brain will say, I'm done. I'm going to sleep. Read. Move. Move every day. 10 minutes in the morning, right before you have breakfast, 10 minutes after lunch. Move every single day. And of course, give it all. Give your jealousy away. Give your resentment away. Give your love away. Just give it all. There's nothing you're taking to the next stage of life. There is some thought of afterlife, but as far as we can see, this is it. And final thought, don't forget to check your assumptions. I love you. Sorrel loves you more. Bye-bye.
Love you.
Have a great weekend, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
One love, guys.
Thank you.
One love.
One love. One love.
Excellent job.
Thank you, Doug.